Kalimera sas, bonjour, good morning. I am pleased to moderate this panel entitled The Third Sector's Role in Developing Strategies to Pave the Way Towards a Social Welfare Society. I might add that as Ambassador of Canada, I'm very proud of the collaboration existing between the Stavros Niarchos Foundation and Canada, especially in the field of education. This theme is especially relevant to me as a career diplomat because modern diplomacy has had to find new ways of engagement and exerting influence, especially in a world of diminishing resources by governments. Diplomacy is no longer the exclusive domain of diplomats. There are new actors, NGOs, think tanks, social media, and all of these actors have transformed the way modern diplomacy is conducted. As such, in diplomacy, we've had to look at new strategies, particularly partnerships, to influence and affect change. So on that note, it's my pleasure to have with us a panel representing organizations which are implementing strategies at the grassroots in support of the social welfare state, and organizations actually funding and supporting the third sector. Although you have abstracts before you, I'm now going to ask each panelist to briefly introduce their organizations before we start a discussion followed by your questions. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Gary Bagley of New York Cares. Mr. Bagley?
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the Foundation for generously supporting both New York Cares and our efforts in New York City by volunteering with us, which is how we work towards societal change. I also would, after that, just quickly discuss the motivation of volunteers, as that is our area of expertise. I would like to show you just a couple pages from our website so that you can understand the organization. It is our goal to make volunteering as easy as possible for all citizens. So, New York Cares, let me see if I've got this here. Bring up the PowerPoint. There we go. A little bit about New York Cares. New York Cares serves 1,300 nonprofits, public schools, and city agencies in New York City. Last year, we filled 151,000 volunteer positions in the 5 boroughs. So the question is, how do we do that? And that is our model. We provide custom-designed projects for the nonprofits. They are managed by New York Cares staff members. However, through leadership development, we have 1,300 team leaders who lead our projects on site. So I'll describe a little bit more about them later. We make our programming easy to access by providing it at a variety of times, at a variety of locations, and we offer a variety of commitment levels from one time to a full school year. About our team leaders, these are volunteers from our base of volunteers who have applied for the job, they interview, they go through additional training, and they become the on-site project coordinators who work with our staff and our community partners to make our projects happen. Each of them is able to manage teams of 5 to 50 volunteers at a time, allowing our staff, because of technology, to manage many thousands of volunteer positions a year. Very quickly, we wanted to show you our site because this is what makes volunteering easy. A volunteer comes to a 45-minute orientation. After that, they can log on to our website and select from up to 2,000 projects every month. You see there are many, many ways they can search by location, by time, by their interest area. Once they search, they get a full list of all the options. It's as simple as clicking that sign up link, and then a team leader is notified that you have signed up for their project, and they take over on managing and getting you all the information you need. You're able to track your projects online with us, keep track of your history. You're able to also evaluate programs online. I wanted to show you that just so that you would understand from a technology perspective, we are trying to drive more individuals to more programs. And members of the foundation have even volunteered with us when they're in New York. So we know we have made it easy for them to orient and go do a project in about 48 hours. A little bit about motivation. We track our volunteers and we measure their involvement with us based in three main areas: how much they serve, how long they've been with us, and the amount of leadership they take with us. So we've created our volunteer engagement scale, and as you can see here, those who are at a higher level also do much more with us. So our communications and our motivation efforts are around pushing people up what we call our leadership ladder. And in closing, I would say that Hurricane Sandy was a superstorm in New York City, and it is engaging many, many additional volunteers. The technology enabled us to get 10,000 volunteers out in the first 6 weeks because people from all over the world were able to access our programs online, be oriented, and then get themselves onto projects very quickly. From a technology perspective, I think one of the things that we're watching is the evolution of social media and volunteering online. No matter how hard we work at that, though, the thing that motivates people to volunteer with us is the feeling of having gone and had a hands-on experience and having made a meaningful difference in someone's life. So that will always be, no matter how good we get at the technology, what I believe that we'll drive toward. We'll take questions later.
Thank you, Gary. I'm pleased to introduce Mareva Grabowski, the founder and vice chairman of Endeavor Greece. Mareva?
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Niarchos Foundation for the invitation. What I'm going to try and do is explain basically what has happened in Greece in the past 3-4 years and why the establishment of Endeavor is very critical at this time. The biggest change happening in Greece today is a paradigm shift away from a state-oriented, sponsored, debt-driven model towards a private sector-driven economy that will foster entrepreneurship and innovation. In the last 3 years, horizontal austerity policy has been applied without substantial focus on structural reforms. No other OECD country has dealt with 25% GDP reduction and unemployment rate of 27%. If we include that in youth, it's double. We are facing fundamental problems that require direct and effective solutions. The private sector has been forced to undertake the cost of the changes because the public sector, they were unable up to now to do any reforms that were absolutely necessary for the country to move forward. In such an environment, entrepreneurship has been largely considered by many as a key lever for growth, restoration, and job creation. The truth is that the Greek society has been traditionally inclined towards entrepreneurship, mainly small-scale, low-productivity units, which, however, was not focused on extrovert, productive sectors and was not extensively utilizing the country's competitive advantages and resources. Pre-crisis, the brightest minds were often rooted to specific private sector jobs as salaried employees or self-employed doctors, lawyers, bank employees. Entrepreneurship was frequently demonized and in many cases connected to inefficiency and corruption. Nowadays, the absence of serious alternatives, we are forced now, it's a force majeure. The globalization of the new generation and the launch of numerous local and international institutions supporting entrepreneurship have created a new wave of potential entrepreneurs. People that in the past chose careers as employees where their role model was a job in the public sector are now interested in becoming entrepreneurs. They are driven by a more extrovert mentality and are much more inclined to cooperate versus of what they were in the past. Established business leaders gradually understand that growth can only come through entrepreneurial shift that involves the younger generation. Entrepreneurship needs to finally focus more on sectors in which Greece has a natural competitive advantage. And we do have such sectors, mentioning some like food, agricultural production, tourism, exploit the human capital also of Greece in such sectors as technological, ICT. Greece needs to develop role models, very important, that will inspire countless of others to deal with the current financial and societal changes. Now, about the Endeavor organization. Endeavor is a non-profit organization headquartered in New York, working with profit-oriented companies. Through its offices in 18 countries, it is leading a global high-impact entrepreneurship movement to catalyze sustainable economic growth around the world. New York Times columnist Tom Friedman calls Endeavor's model for high-impact entrepreneurship the best anti-poverty program of all. Its main contribution is not providing poverty alleviation or engaging in traditional third sector philanthropic initiatives. It focuses on providing a network of support to high-impact entrepreneurs who can generate new jobs, revenues, with the support of established domestic in the country business leaders and experienced professionals that voluntarily serve Endeavor's mission. Endeavor uses high-growth businesses to transform economies. We do so by identifying the best entrepreneurs that lead innovative companies across sectors and helping them unleash their potential and becoming role models through access to unrivaled network of top business leaders around the world who provide the key ingredients to entrepreneurial success: mentorship network, strategic advice, inspiration, and introduction to investors. We don't provide funding, but we do provide the introduction to the funding. Endeavor's first European operation started in Greece in September 2012, supported by a board of prominent business leaders from various sectors and surrounded by a strong mentors network of approximately 40 people. Our mission is to find the top local entrepreneurs that will establish a new era of hope, optimism, and sustainable economic growth. Since 1997, Endeavor has screened and provided feedback to 30,000 candidates and selected 800 Endeavor entrepreneurs from 500 companies throughout Latin America, South Africa, Turkey, Egypt, and Jordan. Supported and mentored by a network of 2,500 local and global business leaders, these entrepreneurs have created over 200,000 high-value jobs and in 2011 generated $5 billion in revenues. Among other metrics, companies in the Endeavor portfolio average a 70% growth rate within the first 2 years of their selection. Currently, Endeavor entrepreneurs donate annually back to the organization, which eventually aims to be self-sustained. In Greece, we have already screened more than 150 companies and selected 8 Endeavor entrepreneurs from 5 companies. Endeavor has significant experience in working countries in transition, and I won't go through the countries that we did pick in order to see some parallels, but we did look a lot in Argentina and saw how it worked in Argentina, what happened during the crisis there in 1999. And we applied the Argentinian model to the Greek model. Endeavor aspires to become a catalyst for a new generation of Greek entrepreneurs who view the crisis not as a threat, but as an opportunity to contribute to a country undergoing the deepest transition in generations. Endeavor doesn't create entrepreneurship from scratch. It helps the entrepreneurial effort that already exists. We just catalyze the conditions under which it can thrive. We believe in entrepreneurs that can change their societies by creating jobs and revenues, contributing to social and financial growth. The organization's mission is to meritocratize wealth and make it possible for people with profitable, scalable businesses and business ideas to develop those ideas in markets where entrepreneurs face daunting obstacles that include a lack of capital, a dearth of role models, and culture that discourages risk. By providing entrepreneurs in these countries with access to the networks and support necessary to scale their businesses, Endeavor enables them to produce a high-impact ripple effect that can generate sustainable wealth and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mareva. It's my pleasure to introduce Hang Ho, who's the Vice President, Philanthropy and Sponsorship at JP Morgan Chase Foundation. Han?
Thanks, Robert. Good morning, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. I guess I represent a slightly different perspective to my fellow panelists in that JP Morgan Chase Foundation is a funding, grant-making organization as part of the JP Morgan Chase Bank. And we operate globally across 37, 38 countries across the world where the bank actually has a business presence. Our approach to philanthropy actually combines our reach, expertise, and financial resources to support local communities, to help them navigate through the current landscape with a lot of complex and challenging economic and social issues. And what I mean by that is I guess we are in a privileged position of being a corporate foundation where we can leverage a lot of the internal and external resources. And we, thank you. And where appropriate, we work with our partners across the non-profit or the public sectors to see whether or not support can come in the form of grants or finance, or connecting to new funders, connecting them to our internal resources, impact investing, engaging in social policy discussions, using our brand and our networks, but also most importantly, and I think perhaps Gary can relate to this, connecting our partners to our huge resources of employees. We have something like 200,000 people across the world. I guess from a funder's perspective, I definitely have to say that there's an increasing focus amongst the funder and donors community on impact, and also asking our partners to be accountable to the results. Certainly from our perspective, we have moved a long way to now having a very sophisticated approach to sourcing deal flows and engaging with our partners. And also we ask our partner, and I guess in some cases, actually demand our partners to operate in the same sort of sophisticated way. So I guess in short, it's probably a move and a shift from giving to a partnership. And I think from that perspective, perhaps from a corporate foundation, we have slightly less flexibility or freedom, as mentioned yesterday, compared to an individual foundation or an individual philanthropist. So I'll stop there for now, but I'll take questions.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to introduce Julien Kleszczowski of Apprentis d'Auteuil.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and for the great organization of the conference. So a few words about Apprentis d'Auteuil. It's a French charity organization, state approved, and which was founded in 1866, in the 19th century. And the goal of the foundation is to support young people, at-risk young people from birth. We have children and young people from birth to 25 years old, mainly from 6 to 21 years old. And we provide them housing, education, training, until they become independent and are integrated into the society. We are working on two main institutional fields. The first is school education. We have primary, secondary schools, vocational training schools, often with boarding and housing. And the second field is on childcare. So we have establishments and services for children who cannot live with their parents due to various social problems. And for these activities, we are funded by the state and by the public funding. We have also other activities on early childhood for young people about social integration also. We have we support 14,000 children and young people each year through about 200, more than 200 establishments in France and overseas departments. So we have about 50% of public funds and 50% coming from donors. And our goal is to support children in an all-round way. That means that we cannot focus only on one dimension of children, but we try to solve problems linked to school, to behavior, to educational, and we are working also to support their parents in their educational role, because we think that is also a very important point to deal with these children and with these difficulties. So we are focused on prevention towards children and towards their parents.
Merci, Julien. Our last panelist, Andrés Nader, the program manager of Freudenberg Stiftung. Andrés?
Hi, you can also say thank you, but you can say Freudenberg Foundation. You know, it's funny, for some reason it's not been translated in the program. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me, and as I was listening to George Soros, I thought, oh, it's hard that our panel is right after him with the depth and breadth and the scale of what he's talking about. We're a much smaller German foundation, but I was also glad that I'm not representing the German government here after, you know, when I was feeling a little, uneasy being here identified as from Germany. But the Freudenberg Foundation is a foundation that both runs its own programs and funds external programs. It works mostly within Germany, but reaches out also across Europe. And they are mostly in partnership with other foundations or seeking partnership with other foundations. And I was thinking about how do I summarize the main goal of the foundation is I think to achieve more social justice, if there can be more of that. And the focus is, on the one hand, one large area is focus on education. And with the assumption, or with the belief, that children have the right to an education that's free of discrimination. I think you'll all agree to that, but if you actually think for a second, you'll actually find that that's not what many children are experiencing in schools. I mean, for us in Germany, but across Europe, you can, or in other areas of the world, you would see similar things. So that's one of the very main areas of work. And the other area, and related to that as a topic that cuts across all fields, is where we also work on racism and other forms of discrimination, monitoring and combating racism, and also offering support for victims of hate crime. And the other thing we do is we work with we do empowerment support for minorities and other disenfranchised groups. I'm wondering whether I should give an example. I think I want to give you one example of the kinds of issues we face in the German system and why we focus on school. We've had, this has been our experience for many years, but recently the UN Commission for Human Rights had a special report in the last 5 years a couple of times, and they've reprimanded Germany on the fact that its school system does not lead to social mobility. Actually, it does the opposite. It reinforces the social status that you come into school in. So if you're coming from a disadvantaged family, that won't change through the German school system, and that's one of the things that we're trying to remedy with our work. And I'll be happy to talk more about what that means exactly later on. Yeah.
Very good, thank you very much. I'm going to start by asking a question to Gary, Julien, and Andrés, and invite the other panelists to jump in at the end if they'd like. Maybe just by way of introduction, what are the challenges and impediments you face in your day-to-day operations? And could you say a word about partnership and collaboration? In all of your abstracts, it was clear in reading them that the engagement with partners is absolutely fundamental to your success. And perhaps you could talk a little bit about what makes for an ideal partnership, and what are your strategies for engaging potential partners in your respective organizations? Gary, would you like to lead off?
Sure, it's a terrific question. I think when we think about the challenges of our work, I will echo what was said something yesterday about philanthropy, which is that although 151,000 volunteer positions being filled in New York City is a number we're very proud of, it's very small in comparison to the number of volunteer service hours that the city could use. So we always struggle to grow and grow sustainably, and I think that partnerships are key to that. One of the reasons we've been able to establish programming as we do is that we are developing citizens, our team leaders. We are also working with community partners. And we were founded because it was hard for those two groups to get together. If you wanted to volunteer, it was hard to find an experience or a meaningful one. If you were with a nonprofit or a school, it was very hard to think of what a volunteer might be able to do for you. So New York Cares in many ways brokers that relationship, and that is a very challenging one as you're trying to make sure to balance the expectations of both parties. I believe that the key to that collaboration from our perspective is providing the management and that expertise that our staff can provide that neither of the other parties either may bring to the table or have the time to bring to the table. So it's again offering ease and flexibility to enter in what is often a very difficult relationship to create, therefore making it possible for the relationship to occur and more of them. I would say the second big challenge, and I think, again, I think of human beings in this way, similar to funding in many regards, is that just like employees, volunteers turn over, they don't come back, and for whatever reason, and that leaves recruitment as a constant effort. So by strategically putting our greatest effort on retention and encouraging people to do more, we've been able to do much more by really targeting our energies there. So I would say that's one of the difficulties of the day-to-day work, but a big benefit.
Thank you very much, Julien.
So, I apologize for my English. I hope it will be clear for everyone. So about the challenges we face and we have, one of our main subjects is to adapt our services to the need of each child supported. And to adapt even better than today. So it's very very important in a context in which we have to find the balance between an individual support and collective support. Of course, we think that the collective support has also very high collective advantages for the education purpose, and for concerning the partnerships. Sorry, we are very. It's of course very important for us to have partners, and we have many partners, but in particular private sector actors, and in particular in our field of vocational training for young people. We can imagine why the goal is to train young people in order them to get a job, to be integrated in the labor market, and the firms which are involved in our actions give also a plays a very important role, since they put excellence and high level professional demand on our young people. An example, we started last year a program with the firm L'Oréal, a famous cosmetic firm, for a training for young girls in hairdress, and these trainings started last year, and it's very interesting to see that the presence of the firm and the presence of the firm can help our organization to show to the girls that it is difficult, it is very demanding, and L'Oréal has this discourse towards these girls, and it plays an educational role, especially for young people who faced many difficulties and who have many other difficulties and not only in school. So it's very interesting to see how the presence and the support of a firm, which is very well known, can play a role in the educational field.
Merci beaucoup, Andrés.
Yes, I'm going to stay in the field of school and education in terms of the examples, and I think when you ask what are the challenges that we see are the scale of the issue, the bigger, even more difficult than that, perhaps the lack of awareness. Am I on the microphone? Yes, okay, I can't hear myself. The lack of awareness, as I was saying, if we're talking about racist discrimination in school, the German government will say our laws don't allow that, so it doesn't happen. But that's not that's not the experience of children at school. So that's, you know, we have a disconnect between what even school officials will say and what education officials will say and what children experience. And that's one issue, you know, the lack of awareness and what do you do to raise awareness about a problem. And the other issue is the long time it takes for you to see change. So we've started, moved on to creating programs that envision at least a 10-year span of, for the program to run as a start, and then hope that it continues. So what we've done is decide to go very local, and we created, for example, a program called 1 square kilometer of education. I'm translating from 1 square kilometer of education, where we create a network of within that one area of a city, with high poverty rates. We work in that area with any stakeholders in education, including the parents, right? To create a network that ensures that children go through all the different steps of schooling, and then also get help when they get out of school, to get mentoring with volunteers to get a job. But it's very focused, and we have 10 of those in Germany, and so it's very local, and it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time. So, but and you asked about partnerships. One thing we've done is to go ahead and start programs, show that they're working, and then get, for example, local government interested and involved. And in terms of the educational stuff, we've gotten different states. It's a federal state system in Germany with education, but different states to commit teacher hours to our program, and then say, okay, a teacher will spend half her working time in our program, working with us. And so it's been that kind of thing, and also getting other foundations to go into these long-range deals where you don't always know exactly, that are somewhat experimental, and that's hard. It's hard to get foundations to cooperate. As I think Terry Salol was saying yesterday, foundations want to have their own branding all the time, and we're trying to do a more collaborative effort.
Thank you very much. Hang or Mareva, would you like to comment briefly on challenges you face in your respective organizations?
Sure, thanks. Actually, it's quite interesting to sort of do a sort of dual perspective, because I absolutely agree and sympathize with all of the challenges that you've raised, because we've seen that through the partnerships that we have with non-profits in our portfolio as well. I guess from the funder's perspective, the biggest challenges that we have when we work with our partners, particularly over the long term, is the challenge around scalability and sustainability, because actually there is a huge amount of great work and great innovation on the ground by social sector organizations at the local level. And as George Soros mentioned before, these organizations are absolutely perfect for sort of innovating and responding to sort of emerging needs on the ground. I can think of, a program that we're working in London that uses technology and networks to move people into work and create a lot more resiliency and sense of progression compared to traditional state programs with, in a much more cost-effective ways. Or in Germany, working with youth from migrant or at-risk backgrounds, and have much better labor market integration rate through very creative activities. But there's only a very small percentage that we have seen through the years that we've engaged in this space of organization who have the will or the capacity to be able to move to the scale that actually create impact at a systemic level, and that also affects their ability to sustain their operation, particularly in this current fiscal environment where the majority of organizations rely on state funding, and in certain countries it's a lot worse effective than others. So we're constantly sort of working with our partners to try to address the issues both at scale and sustainability. And I completely appreciate that in order to do that, funders and donors need to be able to take a long view at these issues, and need to be prepared to engage in these partnerships over sort of 3 to 5 to even 10 years in some cases when you talk about social mobility. But from a funder's perspective, I think that there's definitely the will or the interest to do that, but it's not always practical because of the sheer amount of needs and organizations out there that constantly call for support. So I guess our challenge is to sort of make sure that we balance the need of diversity, reaching out, but also committing to a partnership that gets to the issue of sort of sustainability. And the other sort of, the other challenge that we face as a funder, and I'm sure others can sympathize, is sometimes one can get pretty overwhelmed with the sheer number of organizations out there addressing any particular issues, whether or not it's employability or sort of, providing business support to businesses. And sometimes it's actually quite difficult, and if not impossible, if it's in a sort of new country for a funder to be able to distinguish or differentiate between one organization or another because of the lack of, I guess, quality benchmark or some standardized methodologies that says this organization is more effective in X and another organization is more effective in Y, different population recognized in all of that. So I think, some sort of help around that infrastructure to just help donors and funders to make informed decisions depending on what they want to achieve around impact and the population that they want to support would be really helpful.
Thank you very much. Mareva, would you like to add to what's been said?
Well, I'll add from a different perspective. The impediments, I would really say, in establishing Endeavor in Greece were a pleasant surprise because there were very few, meaning that the business leaders embraced the launching of Endeavor in Greece, something that I was so pleasantly surprised because the notion of giving back in Greece in business leaders was non-existent. And a lot of people told me that I'm crazy to start such a thing, being after so many years in finance and hedge funds. What are you doing? Are you crazy? Well, crazy is a compliment, actually, and you have to think big. So I was extremely pleasantly surprised from these business leaders that were willing not only to give the funds, because the funds, it's easy. You write a check, and it's very easy for them. But it's the pro bono hours that they've invested in this organization that has really surprised me. So in terms of impediments and challenges, I would say that, the one thing that I faced that was the biggest challenge is convincing Endeavor Global to come to Greece. They had not started an affiliate in Europe. It's the first country. They were skeptical. They were wondering if there are really any entrepreneurs in Greece or if it's mainly large conglomerates that are working. So I would say that that was the biggest challenge. And facing the future, one of the challenges that we have is identifying the right entrepreneurs that can really prove that there is innovation and entrepreneurship in Greece.
Thank you for that. In a way, you've preempted my next question, but I'll pose it and perhaps in a different way. You just highlighted that you were pleasantly surprised at the level of response from the private sector, but I wonder if I could ask the question to all panelists generally and respond in the way you see fit. What are the best strategies that you have used to actually engage partners? What is the key to making your pitch and eliciting support from other actors, foundations, private sector institutions? We've seen in the Greek context that the private sector has shown an interest and a level of engagement that surprised Mareva, but I'm curious about others and what you have found most helpful and successful in actually making a case for support from third parties. Maybe we can start at Andrés this time and work our way back. Andrés?
I was hoping you wouldn't do that because I was just trying to think about the question because I was thinking, well, if I knew the answer, I think I mean, I don't think I have, the recipe. I think what, and that's generally the approach we take, is we, you keep going, which is what George Soros recommended, right? Keep at it, and then. But I think the one thing that we do at all levels, and really at all levels, which is easier said than done, is create a partnership on a basis of equal partners. Bring everyone in with their stakes and with their interests, and really engage in a conversation that's about keeping the impact of what you're trying to do in mind on the actual people that should be affected by it. So and not on what's it going to do for your foundation, but what is it going to do for the children of that district, and then just keeping it focused on that. That's what we do. I'm not sure it works that well, but that's what we do. So.
Thank you very much, Julien.
Sorry. I think that the most important thing, even if it's quite general, but is to give sense to our partners, and to show that their support is sense-making for our young people. So it's a very important thing, and we have some operations. I can give one example. We have some people who are we call them ambassadors. These people have high professional positions, and they commit to help for fundraising, the witness, and etc. And one of them is a famous founder of cooking restaurant, and of cooking activities, and we organized with him an operation with our young people who follow a training in cooking, and it was of course very, very interesting for him, for this famous cooker, but also of course for our young people and our trainees in cooking.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hone my question a little bit for Hang, because one of the questions to Mr. Soros, I think, that was put was, how can innovative NGOs actually succeed in getting funding? And I'd be interested to know, based on the general question, when you get proposals, when you drill down, what are you looking at? What are the measurable things, or what are the criteria that really weigh favorably when you're making decisions about whom you're going to fund?
Sure, happy to answer that. I think, as I mentioned before, and I think a lot of funders can share the same experience at the moment, in that there's a huge upsurge in terms of, let's say, requests or organizations that approach you. So I think we have to be extra diligent in terms of how we select organizations that we would get behind. And I think one of a few things that would make an organizations really stand out, because actually a huge amount have amazing ideas and great programs on the ground, but I think the ones who stand out for us are the ones that have absolutely clear mission in terms of what they want to do and what they want to achieve, because actually there are a number of organizations out there that have very lofty missions, but when you actually look at their operations and what they have done in the last few years, you will be able to see whether or not they've truly sort of committed to that missions, or they've been chasing money, so sort of deviated from their mission, depending on what other funders have asked for. I think another really important component is the track record, or the evidence of impact. And a lot of organizations do come to us and said, well, you can see impact by going and see what we do on the ground, and that's obviously very, very good and absolutely much needed. But I think if you are looking at sort of approach this in a sort of professional way and looking at scale and looking at sort of serious funding, you need to be able to invest in a very robust measurement and evaluation system, and being able to demonstrate the impact in a very objective way rather than sort of rely on passions and sort of subjectivity. Also, I think particularly in this climate, it's really important for us to see a strong business plan with a relatively healthy, diversified streams of income. And the reason for that is, I think it's always the worst case in the world where you, as a funder, create a sense of dependency for an organization. And so in order sort of to avoid that, I think a strong business plan and diversified incomes is important. And I think it's not always possible, particularly if you're talking about organizations at an early stage of development. And so in that case, I guess the strong leadership and also the will to want to get to that stage is important. And in that case, we would work with organizations to make sure that they get to a stage when they are sustainable, they have a diversified income stream, and they have a strong M&E system. So I guess the ability to demonstrate these characteristics and the will to engage in a partnership to get to these qualities are really important. And I think lastly, what has been really great in attracting funding are organizations that can leverage different income streams, leverage one funders to get more funding from another organization. And I think in a pragmatic way, Andrés said before, organizations, whether or not they're funders or NGOs, tend to be quite protective of their brand, even though there's an appetite to collaborate. So on a pragmatic level, actually, if there's a very specific opportunity to collaborate and convene people together, whether or not they're delivery organizations or funders, the really smart organizations are able to use their programs or propositions to bring people together. So, for example, in the UK, we're working with a trust that specializes in tech innovation. Then we fund the social design program, and then somebody else will come along and provide the impact investing for scale. But so it's on a very pragmatic level, that's the sort of perfect collaboration, and it will enable the organization to get quite a lot of funding by leveraging.
Thank you very much. Mareva?
Well, I'll go from the other perspective because we have, we're on the other side. So basically, I think that what was successful for us was the belief in the objective. We had the clear mission. As Hank said, it was very important. The point of a great brand name that has worked in other countries was plus for the board members and the funding that we received, the track record in the other countries. I think I would say that the most important part of the success has been the engagement of the time spent from these board members and the 40 people in the network, the mentors as well as the board members, because again, it's people who are very busy and who dedicate a lot of their time. So,
thank you very much, Gary.
I think what I would add to what's already been said is that is for us to remember that your different types of funders have different motivations for funding you. So we certainly take the time to think how individuals, how foundations, and how corporations each engage with our mission and make sure to communicate to them in a way that is most compelling, if you will, from their perspective. I would think for corporations, and this is certainly specific to New York Cares, but we've developed a sponsorship program where one of the benefits of sponsorship is that we also plan customized volunteer experiences for the employees of the corporation. And many, many corporations are able to sponsor us because they also want to engage their employees in the community. So last year, when I mentioned 151,000 volunteer positions being filled, 12,000 of those were corporate volunteers. That additional benefit to knowing they're helping us meet our mission, but that there's also a way to engage staff members of the corporation in the good work that we're trying to do, I believe is an added benefit. And certainly one thing we see in the United States is that for most funders, there is the joy, if you will, of knowing they're helping you meet your mission, but then there's also trying to understand what other benefits, what other ways there might be to engage with you. And I would say that our corporate is probably the best example of that.
Very good. Well, thank you everyone. We have about 25 minutes left for questions from the floor. I believe there are folks circulating with microphones, so I would welcome any questions or comments on what has been said this morning. Do we have a first question? We have a question just over here on the right-hand side. You'd just like to raise your hand so that they can come to you with a microphone, that would be great.
Sorry about forcing people to run. I'm like on the furthest side of the room from where the microphone was. Thank you, panelists, for your talks, and something that was touched upon. The variety of organizations and NGOs that exist can be really daunting, to foundations in particular, and choosing who to subsidize and help or support or engage with can be efficient if foundations are vigilant. But getting those benchmarks set up as to who's good and who isn't, getting them to strive for excellence in a more coherent pattern hasn't really been done very effectively. Watchdog organizations don't really publicize who does what really well. Do you have a model or a way to tease out the organizations that are just floaters and passive, or passive parasites at best or worst, from the ones that are doing really high caliber, effective, proper work?
Hein, maybe you'd be the best place to start, huh?
Well, that's why I raise it as a challenge. I don't think we've quite got there yet. But I think, there's no coherent framework. You're right, and that's why I think at the moment we try our best in a very specific, sort of each specific location, to build a network. In some countries, such as the UK and to some extent the US as well, and Germany, there's the infrastructure. So for example, in the UK, there's the UK Charity Commission, whereby it's absolutely by law that you have to publish all of the sort of financial activities, all of the outputs, and to some extent submission of impact reports to demonstrate outcomes. And in France, if you're engaged in, say, business development service activities, then it's not mandatory, but you have to, or you can, disclose and be transparent about your efficiency, cost per employment, opportunity generated, etc., etc. So, from our perspective, I guess we look for those organizations who go above and beyond what is mandatory to engage in sort of voluntary but very good benchmarking activities, because at that point then I guess you can differentiate between those who are willing to be transparent about their costs and their outcomes versus those who are not. And I completely recognize that these activities are pretty cumbersome in terms of sort of bureaucracies and form filling, and small organizations might not have the capacity to engage in that because of sort of lack of resources. But I think it certainly does help in the interim for us to navigate through the network. But I certainly think that there's a gap there, and whatever that can be done to help provide more transparency would be really, really helpful for funders.
Thank you for that. Andrés, you have a unique perspective because you're an NGO, you're a foundation, and you also support non-governmental organizations, so you have a unique perspective. So perhaps you'd like to comment.
Right. Well, I was thinking, I was, as you were talking, I was thinking about what else could I say, and I think what I thought of is an additional set of issues that are not systematic either, or that might sound subjective as well. I mean, on the one hand, I think what you look at is, and that's something that George Soros said he tries to avoid, but I'm not sure we can as funders, is what's the idea? I mean, you called it the goals, but what's the idea that this NGO is trying to implement? And what language is it using to explain? I mean, so a lot of it has to do with presentation as well, how convincing and how cogent, and how much research has gone into an analysis before it comes up with some action, we're going to solve the problems of the world by doing X. Well, have you looked actually at what's going on before so that's another thing, how serious has been the engagement with the issues that they're claiming to be addressing. And the other thing that will play a role, you mentioned it briefly in the beginning, leadership. And I think, what kinds of people do you see leading the organization? And that, I think, will be partly subjective. I'm sorry to say, is this inspiring in some way? And is it... I mean, my first thing will be, do I believe it? And then will other people believe it, beyond the numbers that they might provide? Both have to be right. And there's one more thing in terms of the ideas is because as a smaller foundation, we also think, okay, we need to create to support exemplary projects, and do they have a chance of them being reproduced elsewhere, but with other, by other funders, so I'm still in the ideas and persons field, which is on top of what Hans said, not to replace that, but I think that plays a role as well. Yeah.
We have a question over here, and then we have one there. Please keep your hand raised. There you go.
Okay. Hi, thank you. As a fellow Canadian here, Robert, I want to thank you for the panel. It's a great moderating. And I also want to echo the comments and thanks to the Niarchos Foundation for the support they've had in Canada. It's incredible, so we're very grateful for that. I just wanted to pick up on the volunteer piece because it seems to me that in Canada we have 165,000 registered charities. 54% of those charities are actually led by volunteers. And when you actually tabulate the volunteer hours and convert those into dollars, it actually tips our GDP, the percentage of the philanthropic sector as it relates to our GDP significantly. So I guess my point to you, Gary, was when you showed that screenshot of the technology that you've developed around the around how you can really just collate and get a person on stream right away. I'm wondering, is that proprietary? Did you create that, in-house? And because I can just imagine there's so many institutions that could use something like that. So thank you.
I'm absolutely willing to consider it as a new funding stream, if you'd like to. Actually, that is proprietary in the sense that New York Cares created it for our own work. We are part, though, of a national organization in the United States called Points of Light. And Points of Light developed a similar functionality, and it uses Salesforce, as do we, by the way. So we're able to work remotely. For instance, during Hurricane Sandy, our own offices were out. We were in downtown Manhattan and couldn't get in the building for a week, and we still were able to mobilize about 5,000 people in the first week, thanks to that technology. Points of Light does actually provide what's called hands-on connect, and it's many of the volunteer centers in the United States do use it. I would add one thing that I didn't really get to touch upon, but in terms of communicating our impact, one of the advantages of, in this case, the Salesforce platform is we're able to customize the data. We're able to track about as much data as you choose on the way in, from where people live versus where they volunteer, how much they do, their age range, different demographics, and really are able to watch trends that then help us be more thoughtful, both in approaching funding, but then also in making our next strategic choice about where to direct our services. So not only did it make it easier for volunteers to engage with us, but I think it's helped make us more effective in doing more and directing the services where they're most needed. I can connect you with Points of Light, by the way.
I think we need a new iPhone app called Philanthropy Matters. I think we had a model yesterday. Maybe there's another one in the offing. Other questions? There you go.
Thank you, panelists. This is a question I kind of know what the short answer is, but I want to know a little bit more about what your thinking is behind this. In the business world, research and development is a great way of going further, and this is following up really on the previous question. So I want to hear from you, individual charities, small scale, large scale, very large scale, but also donors. How can they use best research and development? Is this a very crucial part of how they improve their services, of what they offer, their end of their stick? And where do you stand on this?
Who would like to broach that question? Han, it's in your abstract, I think you talked a little bit about this, so why don't you lead off?
Sure. I think from a funding perspective, we make it absolutely compulsory that anybody whom we engage with or partner, impact assessment and research activities are absolutely compulsory, where the organizations have in-house resources to do that. They should do that. Where they don't have the resource to do that, it's part of our funding to commission an external think tank to help them with that activities. And I think from that, I mean, it's an important tool for the organization, particularly those who are looking to grow, to be able to demonstrate impact in an objective way, but also I think more importantly through that process of having somebody externally coming in and looking at your processes and identifying gaps or areas for improvement or things that are going really well and they should sort of do more of. I think that's been hugely valuable for the organization as they think about growth and development. And so I think R&D is absolutely part and parcel of what we ask the organizations to do. And I think it's been hugely valuable. But I know that not all funders do that because actually there's a huge amount of people who just want to see money going into delivery, and that's absolutely great. But I think at least from our experience, what you think or the hypothesis of the organization when they start out can not, most of the time it works, but if you look at, I guess, the nuances of the activities, this one works slightly better in this circumstance than the other one. I think you can only do that through sort of having take a step back and engaging in sort of proper R&D. So I would encourage other funders to do the same, although knowing that delivery funding is also really important.
Andrés, would you like to comment?
Yes, I think, I mean, I also mentioned research as an important part of what, or an analysis of this, at least of the situation. And I think the other thing we've done as a foundation is the one thing is impact analysis to see, okay, what is the activity actually achieving? The other thing is we've funded ourselves, and actually I'm going to plug a plea right after I say what I'm saying now. We fund research that's independent of projects on social issues, just to, on things that we think are not being looked at. And, whether it's a study in Germany of the educational situation of Roma, of the Roma minority in Germany, which is, where the German government says, oh, we have no issue, and we say, well, actually there is, so we have funded things like that. And I wanted to mention one more thing here. We've been funded for the last 10 years in Germany, a survey monitoring discriminatory attitudes towards, in a range of parameters for 10 years, and that has given us now, we've seen correlations between different forms of prejudice on the one hand, and we can see, how even you can track it to economic shifts, and then see what happens in terms of attitudes, racist attitudes, homophobic, sexist, whatever, anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Roma sentiment, and then we want to do that Europe-wide, but we need other foundations to do that with us. We're too small to fund a project across Europe. So if other foundations are interested in doing that with us, get in touch with me. We're actually looking to start something like that. And I want to say some of the thinking behind this is that we're noticing in what we're calling the current situation, we've seen in different countries a turn to a nationalist and racist rhetoric that says, okay, redistribution, yes, but in a different way, only for those of us who are the proper Greeks and not for the others. This is something the mayor mentioned in passing, and not as an issue. George Soros mentioned it today as well. But that's the kind of things that we're trying to also take a longer range look at, to see what are the attitudes that then produce such kind of responses. And then, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Gabriel Müller from Light for the World. I'm working with different NGOs since 15 years, and at the moment I'm a little bit confused because about definition. We have charity, we have philanthropy, we have social impact investing, and sometimes it's competing, depends on where and how. The church is closer to charity, probably. Philanthropy is more to reach wealthy people, and the modern impact investing, it's from the financial sector. And there is the field of philanthropic advice as a business model in Switzerland. There are hundreds of them. For me, it's complementary. And for our NGO, the donors, the 200,000 donors, they like to hear charity stories. But on the other hand, we have the impact evaluation of PricewaterhouseCoopers that investing in prevention of blindness is, has very high impact. So is it competition? Is it complementary? Is there something common or completely different? I would be glad to hear from your side.
Who would like to tackle that question?
I'm not sure you're actually asking a question. I mean, I think you have the answer. I mean, that's what when I hear you say, yes, you have this variety. Maybe I should say, maybe I've not understood the question, if someone else has understood. But I mean, yes, there's a variety of languages, and there's a variety of practices. I think it's interesting, George Soros told us this morning, there's no perfect system, so so I think we have to deal with a variety of approaches we have, but maybe I've missed your point.
I think it's, if I understood well, I think it's complementary, and I think that you see a lot of institutions, financial institutions, you see a lot of accounting firms, consulting firms that are engaging, that don't see it as a competition, but as a complementary part. We have been doing a lot of work with Bain, who is doing this work for free. It's the Give Back program. We're doing work with Ernst & Young in all the countries. So I think that, I would definitely define it as complementary to it.
Perhaps the last question or two before that long-awaited coffee break. This question there.
Hello. I would like to ask if you have any idea about how could a strategy be developed in order to be able to match the innovation that you have in like grassroots programs, you know, in like small teams and initiatives and like spontaneous movements, and the professionalism and the scaling that big corporations and like impact investing and like big philanthropical like institutions can bring. So that because in the big projects you may lose the picture of the ground, you know, what's going on the ground, but in smaller projects you don't have the professionalism to scale up and actually have an impact that's larger and can be actually meaningful for in a long term. Thank you.
Han, would you like to tackle that one?
That's a great question, and I think the tension between scale and impact is something that every single organization struggles with. I mean, we are currently working with a fabulous organization in London, I mentioned before, that uses technology and networks to support people to get into work and progress. And they are achieving incredible results on the ground in sort of 2 specific London boroughs. But the results that they generate amongst 500 people is excellent, but they can't really go and compete or ask for or compete with state funding if they can't demonstrate that they can generate the same results at, say, 1,000 or 2,000, because that's what prime contractors who get commissions from the government, that's the scale that they deal with. But they have to do that if they want to be sustainable, if they want their program to be sort of systemic, because they genuinely believe, and we also believe, that that's a much more effective and cost-effective way of supporting people into work. So you won't be able to get the answers overnight. It's going to, and we're engaging in an 18-month project to see how, through an iterative process, gradually scaling up and tweaking the services and tweaking the technology to see how you can cope at scale, but not compromising the quality and the TLC and the sort of personalized approach that in the first place generate a very, very good result at moving people into work. So I think it definitely needs investment, but also they need to be really, really open in terms of tweaking and changing the model so that it works at sort of, you know, at a 1,000, 2,000 scale versus 100 to 500. And I think technology really, really helps in that perspective to get to scale, but it's not the means to an end. It's a great help in terms of the enabler, but at the end of the day, it has to facilitate the face-to-face and the localism interaction to preserve that sort of innovation and local interaction.
Please.
I would just add one thing. In working with so many nonprofits in New York City, I think a strategic decision that a small nonprofit can make and in working with businesses is the selection of board members who can be good advice on exactly these issues. You know, as we start with our passion and we start addressing different social issues, finding someone with a business sense who deals with questions of scale on a day-to-day basis can be a wonderful addition to your passion. And I will say, you know, for me, that is one place where the advice of board members to think of that question is very helpful. And I think the question of breadth versus depth is one you will have for the rest of your life, as long as you are in nonprofit. And we want to do as much as we can without sacrificing quality. And that must be part of the discussion with your funders as well, because they want you to do as much as you can, but not sacrifice quality. So I would just say, don't stop having the conversation.
Perhaps we have final question. Oh, it's coming, the microphone's coming.
This is very dynamic. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I represent the Federation of American Women's Clubs Overseas, and we are the American Women's Organization in Greece. Question, your New York Cares. Points of Light, great organization, I know about it. It's US centered though. So if we wanted to do something like a web hosting of what New York Cares is and do something like that in Athens, would I be dealing with Points of Light or with you?
You can start with me and I'll get you to Points of Light. There are 10 international affiliates now, and I'm not going to be able to rattle them off. But they're definitely Milan. There is a CARES affiliate there called Hands on Milan. There's one in the Netherlands for certain. There's one forming in London, and then there are several in Asian countries and one in Africa. So the model is expanding, and certainly as I was thinking about this panel, the approach to volunteerism in the United States is so unique to the United States that I think an international a fellowship or partnership of affiliates really looking at how to engage citizenry, especially if volunteerism isn't a core value or needs to be more developed, is great. But start with me and I'll hook you up with Points of Light. They do have an international affiliate network now.
Before bringing this panel to a close, perhaps I could exercise moderator's privilege and just ask a question, but would ask for a brief reply. Perhaps you could, each of you, give one word of advice in terms of how do we engage, particularly in a country like Greece, young people to be more engaged in philanthropy. I think Mr. Soros was asked a question about whether philanthropy should be a core class or taught in schools, but I wondered if you could put forward a best practice, perhaps, that you're aware of as to how to engage young people in giving back and becoming engaged in society and contributing. Would someone like to start, Mareva, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I think the part of the role model is very, very important, and it's something that was lacking here. I think role model in terms of models themselves and institutions and organizations themselves that act. I think that in Greece, you've seen a shift because you see institutions, even like organizations like the Narcos Foundation also, that are doing more, and that attracts. So it's like a domino effect, and it gets others involved. So that, I think, and also the point about education that Mr. Soros mentioned, I think it's very important to have a class in high school on philanthropy. Because it's something that did not exist, and the notion of volunteerism did not exist in Greece. And we see that change. We see that with the change in the country and the mentality, we see also that changing.
Gary?
I would say, from my own experience, that if as much as possible to make access easy, to make experiences as flexible as possible, but then the commitment on the other end is that they be as meaningful as possible. We do know that if the first experience is not a meaningful one, it's almost impossible to get that person to return. I would say, by the way, about 50% of our volunteer base is 25 to 34-year-olds, so it is an age group that we have thought quite a bit about, and ease and flexibility. And then I would also add that social interaction as part of giving back is remarkably important. I think people are not attracted to us because they work in teams, but they stay because they work in teams. That's what they tell us.
Interesting. Thank you. Hang, maybe a best practice from your perspective. There are probably many, but perhaps one or two that might inspire.
I'm not sure if they're best practices, but definitely great examples. And all of those great examples in terms of engaging young people have sort of combined role models with education, but also with meaningful opportunities, as Gary said. And from what we have seen, particularly in communities from more challenging areas, actually the sense of community is really, really strong. Compared to, say, sort of cities. So it's actually the resources and the opportunities that are available for young people to take part in and encourage them to do so is actually more important, because I think the will is definitely there. So it's just making sure that the opportunities are created and sustained.
Thank you very much. Julien?
Yes, we in our schools we have some, not classes about philanthropy, but some projects for our young people who help, who are are sensitized to this question, and there are some projects where they commit or they engage for homeless people, for example. So we have, I think that the most important point is that is to show show these young people that their qualities, their talents they have can be useful for philanthropy, for the others, and I think that the confidence at the beginning is the key to allow to have yes, philanthropic engagement.
Thank you. Andrés, a final word?
Yeah, well, to add to what was said, I think two things. I mean, I think it's been mentioned, but I mean, together I definitely get away from the idea that it's about giving money, but also giving time. But the other thing that I would try to do as a message is to say it's about engagement with the community you live in, and for me, it's not just about altruism. It's not just about doing the good for other people, but also thinking, what kind of society do I want to live in, right? So it's in my self-interest to see, to help those around me. So I think that, I mean, I'm sorry, it's a message, but I think I'd work with that message to reach, and then the whole engagement in the community. You told me at lunch yesterday, Gary, people are actually, we've studied, people are happier when that volunteer and engage with that, so it'll make you happier too. So. Okay.
And more.
On that note, I'd like to thank our excellent panel. Thank you very much for your attention.
Before we break for a much-needed coffee, we will watch a very short video. It's no more than 4 minutes from yesterday's breakout session, so that you can have an idea of what was discussed during yesterday's 4 breakout sessions, linking the notions discussed with today's breakout sessions to follow. I would also like to mention that as there has been a typo in your programs, coffee break will last until 12 o'clock, and then from 12 to 1:30, we will break in the usual 4 rooms. So in this room, the group on capacity building, on community engagement. The group on community engagement will meet in this room. The group on capacity building will meet in room Aphrodite, right opposite the registration desk on the ground floor. And the groups on social entrepreneurship and microfinance on the lower ground in the rooms Kleoniki A and B. At 1:30, we will have lunch in the room again opposite the registration desk. And we will meet here again at 3 for the keynote speech by Mr. Gary Kasparov. The video, please.
In today's session, we discussed philanthropy's role in promoting accessible healthcare for all and how the 3 sectors of the social welfare society model work together to achieve that. There are many challenges in accessing healthcare in both low-income and high-income countries, be it due to lack of resources, human and otherwise, as well as social, cultural, financial, geographic barriers. And challenges continue to grow, especially in crisis-stricken areas like Greece. But many inroads have been made with philanthropic funding, which can help key players work closely within a community to determine needs and develop creative and innovative solutions to meet those needs, and which can respond in flexible and fast-paced ways to growing urgent needs. Thank you.
This is the breakout session of Accessible Education for All. Instead of moving towards the 2015 deadline to achieve universal primary education, we're moving away from that goal. Today, 57 million children remain out of primary education, while 250 million more are going to school but are not really learning. We're experiencing both a crisis of education, learning and skills, but at the same time, a crisis in funding on a worldwide level concerning education. Philanthropy can support the startup, the nurturing of innovative ideas in order to make the educational system on a national and international level more effective through using a bottom-up rather than a top-down approach, constantly taking into account the values of transparency and accountability.
collaborations between states, foundations, and NGOs are seen as extremely important. It is hard to measure if grants in this area are cost-effective, as they have a longer-term impact. It is not only a matter of how many people you educate, but how well you educate them in order to be able to progress as a society. Lastly, if education is a right, it should then be a right to all. The very foundation of democracy is measured by the inclusion of all in education. Thank you.
The purpose of the session was to figure out possible approaches to address food insecurity, to provide housing solutions for the most vulnerable, and to create job opportunities. The discussion definitely illustrated the importance of collective action. All of the projects presented showed a very strong collaboration between NGOs, public sectors, foundations, as well as civil society. A presentation of the global situation of homelessness in Europe showed the dramatic increase in youth homelessness and the emergency to take action in order to avoid creating a new chronic homelessness. Emphasis was placed on the key role of housing as a condition to social integration for the most marginalized groups. The discussion also illustrated that in dire times, very accessible solutions can be developed, such as channeling food access for people in need, reallocated underused buildings to provide housing solutions. The return to agriculture was also illustrated as a possible option to fight youth unemployment in Greece. But more generally, I think it's very important to illustrate the increase in international collaboration between NGOs, an example of best practices that may they prove in the US that are now making their ways throughout Europe very successfully. Thank you.
We discussed the importance of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and how important it is to support innovative programs that are inclusive and accessible to all. We addressed education, arts, employment, and social welfare. As funders, it's important to identify programs that are islands of excellence and to support these innovative models that make sure to take input from service providers and people with disabilities. Even in the midst of the crisis, it's important to have programs that make sure to focus on self-reliance, independence, and self-determination. It's important that people with disabilities not only have rights, but are able to enjoy these rights and are accepted by both their local community and society at large.